Got into this to try to show a lot of the young people that there is a way for us to have ownership, even in a world of crazy inflation and fiat debasement. If you didn't adopt the internet as a company, you went to zero. Facts. Most of my stuff is in cold storage Bitcoin. And the reason I do that is because I want to save that money. Bitcoin is my high yield savings account. And this is probably the most important message of the whole video. Just get off zero. You should not have zero Bitcoin. That's actually quite risky for you to do that. You know, the XRP ledger literally has missing blocks. It's ridiculous. Brad Garlinghouse was super anti-Bitcoin, talking about how it's bad for the environment because he was trying to push that propaganda with Greenpeace. Keep holding Ethereum and keep losing money. That's okay. That's your prerogative. You're allowed to do that. You know, you're allowed to make bad decisions in your life. You know, congratulations. It helped me to realize this is actually an energy currency, and energy can't be created or destroyed. It just gets transferred into different forms, different mediums. And once I understood that Bitcoin was incorruptible money, and it was a very powerful invention or discovery, however you like to see it. And that Satoshi gave us something to help fight back. Government issued currencies continue to fail. All right. They've been failing since the dawn of paper money. All right. There's a reason why we see currency collapses all throughout history. The government has too much power and too much authority over the issuance of currency. And that great power and that great responsibility always gets neglected. It always gets abused. Right. And that's how we see the dollar dying. That's why we see the price of everything going up over time. Countries assume that they'll be around for the next 100 years. That's what they want to do. So they need to think 100 years out. All right. And when you're thinking 100 years out, you realize, oh, the dollar is on its last legs, right? Maybe 2 more decades of the dollar dominance, and then we got to transition over to something else. Who's going to be left holding the bag, and who's going to be the new big dog? Who's going to be the champion who, once again, has the global power? There's going to be a transition to a neutral and global reserve asset, right? The world tried capitalizing on gold in the past. That didn't work. All right. That's how we're in the predicament that we're in now. All right. The gold standard failed. And now we're moving on to the Bitcoin standard. Really, it's not controlled by one entity. But with Bitcoin, it's like the purest form of anti-censorship. And, you know, Bitcoin is one of a kind invention. And because of that, you know, I stopped buying any altcoins. I didn't want to hold any other coins. I just wanted to hold Bitcoin because...
All right. Welcome to Real Hard Money, where we unpack Bitcoin's raw power to redefine wealth and freedom. I'm your host, Khalif Harold, and today we're joined by Gen Z BTC, the Bitcoin visionary and electrifying voice for millennials, gaining notoriety on X and YouTube. His breakout video, Why I Have 100% of My Net Worth in Bitcoin at 26 years old, has built a strong following with his unapologetic Bitcoin maximalism. He's revolutionizing logistics for Bitcoin ventures and leading bold roundtables, inspiring a generation to ditch fiat for BTC. I like what he's doing. I love how he speaks about Bitcoin in a way that people can understand, and I think you will too. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, Gen Z BTC. Thanks for coming on. Good to see you.
What up, everybody? Thanks for having me, Khalif. You know, the Real Hard Money podcast. This is Gen Z BTC. Got into this to try to show a lot of the young people that there is a way for us to have ownership, even in a world of crazy inflation and fiat debasement, and just getting at it one day at a time. And then being on this platform is just another way that I try to do that. So thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Awesome, man. So can you give us a little bit of backstory on how you came to Bitcoin? And I know you've heard about it for a while before you jumped into it, but how did you come to Bitcoin, and what was your aha moment when it finally clicked for you?
Right. I heard about it back in 2019, really around the same time as the GameStop blow off top, the meme craze, the Wall Street bets, all that stuff. Kind of got into Bitcoin through that. And I put my stimulus check into Bitcoin when I first got it. You know, I was working at a retail store, not making that much money, but Bitcoin then had its crazy run up back in 2021, you know, and I just saw my purchasing power increase so much. I thought that there's no way that anything could ever go wrong. I had all my money on Voyager. You know, I didn't know about self-custody and all that other stuff, and I ended up losing there. But the day that it really clicked for me was when I watched this YouTube video by a YouTuber called Yoni Appleberg. He has a really great channel. You guys should check out his channel. And all his videos were just awesome, and they just really clicked for me. And they helped me to understand what proof of work was, why that mattered, how Bitcoins are mined, and then understanding how Bitcoin actually worked. It helped me to realize this is actually an energy currency, and energy can't be created or destroyed. It just gets transferred into different forms, different mediums. And once I understood that Bitcoin was incorruptible money, and it was a very powerful invention or discovery, however you like to see it. And that Satoshi gave us something to help fight back against a lot of the issues that we're seeing today. And, Bitcoin is one of a kind invention. And because of that, I stopped buying any altcoins. I didn't want to hold any other coins. I just wanted to hold Bitcoin because that was the only thing that made a lot of sense to me. So shout out to Yoni Appleberg. I'll always give him props because his channel literally was the thing that helped me to understand it. So check him out.
He could have been the man that saved your life if you think
For
about
real.
it.
And that might sound
You know,
dramatic to some people, but
right?
once you understand Bitcoin, it really does change the trajectory of how you see the world. It takes you from a over consumer, right, to someone who's more of a saver, someone who thinks about the future a little bit more, and it's just one domino effect in an entire shift that you couldn't go through. I'm not saying it definitely has to happen, but most Bitcoiners do find that as they understand Bitcoin better, different aspects of their life do start to change. Their mentality shifts, especially when they think about different things regarding the future, right? Being a high time preference person versus a low time preference person. Are you able to plan outward? Are you able to control your impulse? Bitcoin helps you to do stuff like that. So I would say it definitely changed my life for sure.
Bitcoin changes you for sure, right?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
you're a young guy. How old are you, might I ask?
26, 100% of my
All
net
right.
worth in Bitcoin at 26 years of age,
That's a big move. That's a big move. And this is a show for the everyday person trying to understand Bitcoin and also people who do understand Bitcoin that want to go deeper. But for the everyday person, they might look and say, well, he's 26. How is he all in on Bitcoin? Where does he get all this funds? Is he going to retire now? So do you have you do have an other income outside job, right? You're coming in stuff and then you allocate to Bitcoin like that.
Yeah. And I mean, when I say 100% in Bitcoin, it's a little bit facetious, right? Because at the moment, we can't actually live 100% on Bitcoin because not everywhere accepts it. It's the same as
Yeah.
someone saying they have 100% of their savings in gold, or they have 100% of their savings in the S&P 500. That might be their savings account where they have a lot of their value, but we still have our day jobs. We still get our checks, and we still got to pay for things in places that accept dollars because that's what they accept. They don't all accept Bitcoin. So if we were to make it a little bit more accurate, maybe I'd say 80% of all my net worth is in Bitcoin, or 80% of the value that I save is in Bitcoin. But I do have a day job. I work for a logistics company. So I basically help companies to move product. I help distributors and manufacturers move product out of the facility and out to where it's got to go. And I get paid every 2 weeks, and a lot of that money goes towards Bitcoin because I want to actually save that money. Some of it goes towards, I like buying strategy shares and stuff like that, but
Okay.
that's a small percentage of my portfolio. I would say most of my stuff is in cold storage Bitcoin. And the reason I do that is
Okay.
because I want to save that money. Bitcoin is my high yield savings account.
That's a great way to put it. And that's how I try to talk to people about it in a way you can understand. Everybody knows about a savings account. Once you become of age and you're making money and you should save, right? And if you're saving, you don't want to save in a melting ice cube. You want to save in something that's real and it's hard and it's money. You brought up that you are in logistics, and I went through your feed and your profile, and I saw that you're pushing to dominate freight and logistics for Bitcoin related sites. What's the wildest opportunity you see in trying Bitcoin and tying Bit to a real world logistics? And how do you plan to take over this market if you're looking into that?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's Definitely going to be an uphill battle for sure, but it's something I think I can do. When you tell people, at least for me, and I tell people in the office that I work for a Bitcoin company and that I'm moving some of their product, they tell me, well, isn't Bitcoin digital? What do you mean? What are you moving? Because a lot of these guys, they work for, food manufacturers or distributors, right? Farms. They work for furniture manufacturers. They work for construction companies. And I do have a lot of those people as clients as well. But with Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining, AI data centers, cloud infrastructure, there's a lot of opportunity to set up the equivalent of server rooms, right? Especially when it comes to Bitcoin mining. So these guys want to find cheap energy that is away from people, right? Because you don't want a Bitcoin mining facility near a neighborhood because they're going to get a lot of noise complaints and there's going to be a lot of issues, right? Bitcoin mining facilities are very loud, all right? They're very hot and they run typically 24/7 if they can, right? And they want to try to capture some of the cheapest energy possible. I'm helping to energize these sites, bringing these sites online. If these guys need to bring the steel to a site out in the middle of Texas, nowhere, right, and get a site built, and then to get the machines in there, make sure they have the right insurance and stuff like that, that's really what I'm here to help do. I want to focus on people who are mobilizing miners, getting them on site, whether you're sending them off the site and sending them to a repair facility. I want to help with that. The racks, right? The racking that these things go into, I want to help get those on site. Really, any step of the way regarding the logistics, I want to be able to help because that's my day job. I don't have a Bitcoin job. I'm turning my day job into a Bitcoin job by going after Bitcoin companies, right? So like that's me kind of thinking out the box and finding a way to have Bitcoin be a part of my everyday life wherever I can, not just buying it and using it to buy things here and there and using it to pay people back. But I'm thinking, how can I actually get involved in the community, not just online, but actually in my day-to-day job? How can I make a difference or an impact in my workplace, right? So, again, I don't really talk about the specific companies I'm working with or the company that I work for to help facilitate this, but using the resources that I have, I'm able to bring people's product to market quicker. I'm able to make sure that they have tracking on their stuff. And like, it feels cool to be able to read about a facility that's going online that I actually helped to, I guess, energize to get online. You know what I mean? I wasn't there doing the construction, but I helped get the construction materials on site. You know what I mean? So that's super cool to me. Yeah, yeah. I would say when it comes to talking to people my age, there's really not too much different talking to someone who's a millennial or a Gen Xer or a boomer, really. It's just about meeting them where they're at and helping to understand exactly what they care about, right? So some people, if you tell them, oh, well, BlackRock is buying a bunch of Bitcoin and so is, Franklin Templeton and so is Wisdom Tree and so is Fidelity, they're like, what? I don't know what that means. I don't even know who they are. Who cares about that? You know what I'm saying? So if you say that to them, they might not really care about that. That might not be relevant to their cause or what they deal with day to day. So meet people where they're at and maybe find out, oh, okay, do you care more about the humanitarian side of things? Do you care more about the First Amendment, right? Like anti-censorship type of things? Do you care about the politicians who have endorsed it? Is that something that might entice you to look into it? Because really what we want to do as Bitcoiners who really understand the protocol, we want to just get the ball rolling for someone, right? We just want to pique their interest and try to tap into their human curiosity. All right. Because some people lose that curiosity because they see the price. Price is 100,000 something. I'll never be able to own one anyway. So who cares? Right. Now their curiosity is dead. They have no need to know. Right. Even though really they do need to know about it. So what we want to do is we want to pique their curiosity. And that all comes down to the individual person. So find out what that person cares about, find out what's close to their heart, and then try to tell them about it. Even if it's something in the future, this will be a real thing. Once Taylor Swift starts endorsing Bitcoin, then a bunch of people will have their curiosity piqued. She's my favorite. So now I want to look into it too. So if you have an influencer or someone who's really into Bitcoin that they might know about it, you tell them, hey, Drake actually likes Bitcoin a lot. You know what I mean? Nipsey Hussle likes Bitcoin a lot. Kendrick Lamar likes Bitcoin. Now all of a sudden they want to learn about it a little bit more, So that may be the first thing. The second thing I'd say in terms of the biggest mistake that I made was not knowing what self-custody was. Being able to put your Bitcoin on your own hardware wallet or your own device. So that way the Bitcoin's actually yours. So what is self-custody? It's basically, right there in the name. It's you holding, yourself custodying or holding the Bitcoin. So let's say you use Coinbase, you use Cash App or whatever you like to use to buy your Bitcoin, PayPal, whatever, Robinhood, whatever. If you buy the Bitcoin and you leave it on that app, technically the app has ownership of the Bitcoin. You're basically trusting them to hold it and not lose it for you. It's the exact same way that when you put cash into the bank, you're trusting that the cash will actually be there if you go to withdraw it, And most likely, yeah, it'll be there, but there is a chance that it won't be. Right. And that's how you get a situation like 2008, where you get a bank run where people are trying to withdraw and there's nothing for them to give you because the money's not there. All right. It's the same as if you put your gold into a safety deposit box, or even if you buy gold stock. Right. If you buy gold stock, you technically don't own the gold. You own a certificate that says that you have a claim to a certain amount of gold, whatever. Right. It's the same with Bitcoin. So if you're buying Bitcoin, leaving it on an exchange, you don't really have it. You have a claim to it because it's in your account there, but anything could happen. The guys could go bankrupt. They could run off with the Bitcoin. They could lose it, and that's kind of what happened with Voyager, right? I had my money in Voyager back in the day, and Voyager ended up going under, or Three Arrows Capital, whoever it was that was the capital allocator and the manager for that company. They ended up going under, and my Bitcoin was I guess kind of washed away. They were able to recover some of the funds, but it is what it is. That's kind of how it went down for me. So that was my story. That was my biggest mistake for sure. Letting someone else hold my own keys, right? There's a saying in Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins, right? And the more you learn about Bitcoin, the more that sentence starts to make sense to you. So that's my main mistake. I now hold my own keys. And because of that, the only person who can lose the coins is me. And that's what I love about it, because I'm not going to lose them. So I sleep very well at night knowing that the Bitcoin are in my custody. Yep. Yes, sir. Absolutely. It is what it is. All these people talking about, oh, well, XRP this, Ethereum that, Caspa this. Listen, if there was a better option, I would just be in it. You know what I mean? I'm not doing this because I'm some sort of Bitcoin cheerleader. It is what it is. If something better were to come along, then we would just transition. All I want to do is keep my money. I don't want to just push Bitcoin. But it just so happens that Bitcoin helps you to keep your money and increase your purchasing power, right? It reduces the amount of counterparty risk that you have to deal with. So that's the reason why I'm a Bitcoin maxi. Man, that is actually hilarious. That's a hilarious question. I actually love that one. But I mean, maybe I dislike them all equally. I really don't know. I guess maybe the XRP guys, because they're just so delusional. They don't know how market cap works. They can't even tell you really what XRP is used for. The main thing they'll say is it's for cross-border payments. How do we do cross-border payments right now? How do we do that? You know what I mean? Like that's already covered. Okay, that's been taken care of. So that's a stupid use case. And secondly, XRP was created in a time before stablecoins, right? It was originally meant to be a stablecoin, which is why the price barely ever moves. And now that stablecoins are here, it pretty much obsoletes XRP. The XRP ledger literally has missing blocks. It's ridiculous. Brad Garlinghouse was super anti-Bitcoin, talking about how it's bad for the environment because he was trying to push that propaganda with Greenpeace. And then he got exposed brutally because Greenpeace had to walk back all the stuff they said about Bitcoin because it was literally fake and lies. I'm not sure if they're the ones who made this article, but there was an article talking about how Bitcoin was going to boil the world's oceans by 2020 because it used so much energy. Last time I checked, the Atlantic Ocean's not boiling, so we're good. God bless. And Bitcoin is actually saving the environment because it incentivizes and monetizes clean energy. Very few people realize that now. Everyone on Earth is going to realize that in 20 years. Anyways, XRP guys, not only did they flip-flop, you know what I mean? The guys donated a bunch of money to Kamala Harris, hoping she would win and then endorse the coin. That didn't happen. Then they made a Bitcoin strategic reserve. They begged to get in it and make an XRP strategic reserve. That didn't happen. Ripple Labs, the company, never bought any XRP. They just mined it all for free, and they only sell it on the open market. Okay, so again, retail's literally getting dumped on daily. It's just ridiculous. You could do that for a really long time. And there's an entire laundry list of reasons why XRP is just like a really sad token. But the saddest thing is, of course, all the people who just want to get into crypto to try to get rich quick. And they think, oh, well, Bitcoin's 100,000 something and XRP is $2. So if I buy it right now, then that's a 50,000x. But they don't understand how market cap works. So, that would mean that XRP's market cap is like 900 quintillion or quadrillion, whatever it is. That's not going to happen. and especially when there's no fundamentals. You know what I mean? Bitcoin works because of the fundamentals. All right. It's not hype. It's not sentiment. It's because of the way it works. Not pumpamentals, all right? No pumpamentals, no unlocks, no roadmaps. We're not doing into that garbage over here, all right? If that's what you're into, just keep holding Ethereum and keep losing money. That's okay. That's your prerogative. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to make bad decisions in your life. Congratulations. But all the people who actually are serious about their future, who are objective, who are able to look at the underlying fundamentals of how something works and then to see how that scales out into the future, those people are in Bitcoin. Last thing I'll say about this, there's a reason why there's a Bitcoin conference with like 30,000 people who are going, and there's no XRP conference because the community is all based around hype, not based around fundamentals.
Yeah.
Let's go. Come on now. They all know. See, this is real recognizing real. Yes, sir.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. In terms of the impact, look at El Salvador. Those guys are up hundreds of millions of dollars just by holding their Bitcoin. It's an unrealized gain, but still, it just shows that it gives you options. It gives you a lot of options when you're able to do something like that. When it comes to the global game theory of Bitcoin, you have to think that government issued currencies continue to fail. All right. They've been failing since the dawn of paper money. All right. There's a reason why we see currency collapses all throughout history. And it all really comes down to the same thing. And it's that the government has too much power and too much authority over the issuance of currency. And that great power and that great responsibility always gets neglected. It always gets abused, right? And that's how we see the dollar dying. That's why we see the price of everything going up over time. So in the long run, you're going to see the world reserve currency, like the US dollar, die once again. All right. This is not the first time this has happened. This is not new. All right. That's what people need to realize. This is not new. All right. This has happened many times before. All right. Great Britain once had the, greatest currency in the world. Now it's not. Spain once had the greatest currency. Now it's not. Romans had the greatest currency in the world. Now it's not. So that always.
Let's take a minute for our sponsor, Satosis, your gateway to revolutionizing the Bitcoin experience. Discover innovative solutions tailored for a seamless journey in the world of Bitcoin, like products featuring Spondylix. Unlock the potential of Spondylix in an advanced automated peer-to-peer trading station that harnesses the power of Bitcoin Lightning Network for instant low-fee transactions. Spondylix not only facilitates fast and private Bitcoin trading, but also serves as a convenient access point for users to buy and sell Bitcoin in various locations. With user-friendly operations and minimal regulatory overhead, Spondylix significantly enhances the accessibility of Bitcoin, supporting businesses, charities, and individuals eager to embrace the world of Bitcoin. Piggy Tips. Transform how you receive tips and donate with Piggy, the smart Bitcoin-powered device that generates dynamic QR codes for effortless microtransactions. Designed for businesses and individuals, Piggy enables you to accept secure and borderless contributions while promoting Bitcoin adoption every step of the way. Are you ready to elevate your Bitcoin journey? Visit satosis.tech, SATOSYS.tech today to explore these innovative products. Engage with our community, and for inquiries, feel free to reach out and discover how Satosis can transform your interaction with Bitcoin today.
In the world. Now it's not, so that always happens. So what countries need to start thinking about, because countries don't think in terms of 1 year, 2 years. Countries assume that they'll be around for the next 100 years. That's what they want to do. So they need to think 100 years out. All right. And when you're thinking 100 years out, you realize, the dollar is on its last legs, right? Maybe 2 more decades of the dollar dominance. And then we got to transition over to something else. Who's going to be left holding the bag, and who's going to be the new big dog? Who's going to be the champion who once again has the global power, right? And most likely, any rational actors are going to realize that there's going to be a transition to a neutral and global reserve asset, right? The world tried capitalizing on gold in the past. That didn't work, all right? That's how we're in the predicament that we're in now, all right? The gold standard failed, and now we're moving on to the Bitcoin standard, all right? But why is it the Bitcoin standard? Again, the fundamentals. Bitcoin is not controlled by anyone. So that means that Russia, China, and the United States all have a vetted interest, as well as any other smaller countries, all have a vetted interest in going into Bitcoin. And the same reason why they all have a vetted interest into looking into and building out the infrastructure of the internet, right? Because really, it's not controlled by one entity. You know what I mean? The internet's a little bit different because there are control structures and there are large companies that can censor certain things. But with Bitcoin, it's like the purest form of anti-censorship. All right. It's the purest form of neutrality. And that's what will entice countries who maybe don't trust each other to work together. In terms of what we can do to keep things decentralized, right? Like I just talked about it being neutral, the United States has a vetted interest in making sure that Russia and China can't control it. The same way that they have a vetted interest making sure that India and the UK can't control it. So countries will try to keep each other in check to make sure that their adversaries don't have the leg up, right? So that's the first thing. But really, it goes down to the individual level, all right? We can't just bet on the countries to make sure that they work together to keep the network decentralized because they could collude, right? There's G7, there's NATO, there's BRICS. You know, these countries could collude to try to make different forks of Bitcoin or different versions of the network. Individuals have to run their own nodes, all right? And then in the future, mine their own coins, you know, if they can. So right now I run my own node. I'm running it on this laptop. You know what I mean? And the node runners are basically the people who transmit the transactions, right? And we also help to keep the rules of Bitcoin in place. All right. We tell the miners what they can and can't accept as valid transactions. You know what I mean? And eventually I do believe that there's going to be a situation where there's a node being run in every home and every business, and there's a miner being run in every home and every business, right? Because when you run a miner, not only do you have the opportunity to mine Bitcoin, it's almost like playing the lottery every day, but you also are securing the network. All right. You're making sure that the network can't be hacked by any outside force. Every time you run a miner, you are securing the network. Bitcoin's the most secure network in the world, which is the reason why it can't be hacked or they can't roll back the blockchain. Once something's in the blockchain, it's there forever and you really can't undo it. And that's what makes Bitcoin so powerful. And again, censorship resistant. So every business that is capitalized on Bitcoin, even something like Stake and Shake, they're accepting Bitcoin. They're going to be running their own node and they're going to be mining the Bitcoin to make sure that their transactions are secured and that they get pushed out to all the other nodes. All right. They're going to be incentivized to do that. And everyone's going to be doing that. And I truly do believe this. I think everyone's going to be doing that in the future. Kind of like, you know, it's the same way that it's almost like how everyone, you know, pays their taxes pretty much. You know, you're contributing to a group network, right? For the net benefit of the people in your community. Now, are the people in charge actually going to use the funds to do something positive for your community? I don't know. That comes down to human corruption. You know what I mean? But Bitcoin's not run by humans per se. It's run by mathematics. It's run by code. And that's why it's so incorruptible. Right? There's no greed. There are no real mistakes. You know what I mean? There's no human error involved. And that's why people feel so comfortable putting their economic energy into the Bitcoin network because you're not trusting people. You're just trusting code. You're trusting math. You're trusting fundamental laws of the universe. And that's way less trust than trusting some shady business guy in a suit who just now became a congressman that's claiming all these things he's going to do for you, but they never come to fruition. Now, that's why people trust Bitcoin. But if you guys are enjoying the video so far, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. You know, check out Gen Z BTC on YouTube. All right, self-plug, shameless self-plug. You already know what I do. And if you're going to the Bitcoin conference, you know what I'm saying, maybe you'll see me there. I'm sure this video will be released after the fact. And I'm going to have a good time there. I'm going to do some recording. You know, I'm very excited. We'll see what happens.
It actually didn't stop. Riverside is the truth. Okay.
Yep.
I lost
I
internet,
kept it
man. I'm
rolling
here
a
on a
little
little island in Thailand, Koh Samui. And that's the island life, I guess, for us, you know?
bit. Right.
But yeah, man, everybody's going to want to run a node eventually once they see the power of the decentralization, because that's one of the strong things about Bitcoin is the decentralized nature that, you know, that's what's holding off the establishment and the government. And like I always say, $5 of Bitcoin, just $5 worth is F you money, because it's the clearest way to say F you to the system. I don't need you anymore. I have Bitcoin. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, for all the newer people, again, Bitcoin doesn't operate inside the current financial system. It is setting out to create a new financial system and dismantle the old one. And just because, you see banks are buying Bitcoin, countries are buying Bitcoin, companies are buying Bitcoin, don't get that confused. You know what I mean? They're not trying to, necessarily integrate it into our current system and keep it that way. They're doing this because they have to. And it's because eventually they know that the jig is going to be up and they don't want to be left holding the bag, having no Bitcoin. And then there's a transition of a new monetary order and you have zero. You know what I mean? That's really what they're doing. They're getting off zero. So the real thing I can say to everyone, this is probably the most important message of the whole video. Just get off zero. You should not have zero Bitcoin. That's actually quite risky for you to do that.
Hey, man, this might be the most beneficial podcast we had to date, man. You're spitting some gems out here for these people. I hope you guys are listening. So Gen Z, man, I see that you host a lot of Bitcoin roundtables, and you recently hosted a roundtable. You have anything like hot topics that recently came up in your roundtables?
Yeah, yeah. I like to try to do these kind of sit down and almost like I'm interviewing the person who's speaking with me, you know what I mean? Just like a conversational type video on my channel. And one of the more controversial things that I guess talked about, controversial, not really in my opinion, but it was the fact that I like to spend Bitcoin when I can, right? So if Steak and Shake is selling burgers for Bitcoin, I'll buy in Bitcoin because they're accepting Bitcoin. You know what I mean? And I got a lot of pushback for that. All right. What was the pushback I was hearing? Some people were saying, well, you shouldn't spend your Bitcoin because it's going to go up in value and you're wasting money because you bought burgers instead of holding it. Some people will say, well, what if you're up on your Bitcoin? You're going to have a taxable event because you sent the Bitcoin for a good or service and that had appreciated in value. So there's that. There's some people who are going to say, well, again, just harping on the fact that imagine if you were spending Bitcoin back when it was only a couple dollars, you'd be in the same situation because you're getting rid of so much value by buying a burger instead of holding it, and stuff like that. So my real response to that is Bitcoin is money. Don't forget that. We understand hodling, hold on for dear life, right? We understand hodling Bitcoin for long time periods, right? But Bitcoin is money and money is meant to be spent and it's meant to elevate your lifestyle, right? It's meant to make sure that you're comfortable. It's meant to give you options. It's meant to open doors for you. And that's what Bitcoin does for all of us after a certain amount of time, right? Now, I'm not saying to go spend all your Bitcoin immediately. And by the way, spending your Bitcoin is not the same as selling it, right? Some people sell their Bitcoin back to dollars, then just hold the dollars for a long time, right? Because they think the price will go down and I'll buy in cheaper. Don't do that. All right. You are not an experienced trader. And even if you are, that's still dumb. That usually doesn't work. Most traders are not profitable. So definitely don't do that. But there's a difference between selling it like that and then using it to buy a good or service. So first off, if Steak and Shake wants to accept my Bitcoin, that's great. That's another step towards what we all want, which is Bitcoin as global money, right? You want to be able to go anywhere and buy something with Bitcoin, right? It all starts somewhere. Someone has to take that leap and start the Bitcoin circular economy, So you can't just expect these things to just happen for you. You have to actually be part of the movement in order for that to go down. If someone's selling a house for half of a Bitcoin, that's a big milestone. You're probably going to want to take them up on the offer because they might be refusing to sell in dollars. There's going to come a point where people refuse to take your dollars. So that's a whole other thing. But yeah, if a company is saying that they accept Bitcoin, I want to give them the Bitcoin because one, I care about using money. And two, I also want to reward Steak and Shake for making a good financial decision. They decided to accept hard money at their establishment, and I want to show them the economic impact of doing that. So when I would usually go to Shake Shack, or maybe I would go to Habit Burger, or maybe I would go to McDonald's, or maybe I'd go somewhere, I'm deciding, you know what, I'm actually going to go to Steak and Shake instead of In-N-Out because they accept Bitcoin. Right. And now the economic inflow into their business in the form of Bitcoin is showing them a strong signal. And that signal is that Bitcoiners have capital and they're ready to deploy it. Right. We're making a good decision here. We need to double down on this decision. We need to add the Bitcoin burger to the menu. We're adding new menu items, blah, 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 whatever they want to do. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And you're just sending that positive signal to them, right? Because here's the truth, and here's the last thing I'll say about it for now. The absolute truth is if Steak and Shake continues to double down on their Bitcoin acquisition strategy, and let's just say McDonald's, which is way bigger than Steak and Shake, if McDonald's decides that they will never, ever, ever, ever buy Bitcoin, never hold it, never accept it, never endorse it, McDonald's will go out of business and Steak and Shake will take all of their locations. It'll take all of their customers. It'll take all their everything. My guy just left the video again. It'll take all of their stuff. Steak and Shake will completely take over. Now, that might sound crazy to you because you say, oh, well, McDonald's has the best real estate and there's too many of them and it's a global brand and it's way more recognizable. It doesn't matter. Over time, every McDonald's will go out of business or they will just get acquired by Steak and Shake because the company will not be profitable enough. They will not be able to keep up with inflation. Okay. Their profit margins will not be big enough. All right. The amount that they have to pay their employees because the minimum wage or whatever it is going to keep going up as well. They won't be able to keep up. Steak and Shake will just take over their entire business model and crush them. All right. It'll be like how Amazon crushed hundreds and thousands of businesses in order to get to the scale that they're at. McDonald's will just get crushed. They'll just be a statistic. And that's true for every single company, right? Because if you're storing all your value in dollars or in US treasuries or dollar instruments, you're going to continue losing value because they can continue to be diluted, right? When you are storing your value in Bitcoin, which can't be printed or diluted, you are not only storing your value, but you're actually gaining value relative to all of your dollar competitors, all of your fiat denominated competitors. They cannot keep up with you. In the long run,
100%.
I'm talking like 25, 35 years from now,
Yeah.
if McDonald's does not have any Bitcoin on their balance sheet and Steak and Shake has thousands of Bitcoin on their balance sheet, they will literally destroy McDonald's and they will slowly eat them and acquire all their customers, all their real estate, and all their money. And they'll
That's a
probably sell
great
a better
take.
product on top of that.
That's
Because
a
I
great
ain't going to
take.
get no McDouble, right? Compared to getting like the burger at Steak and Shake. The quality's way different. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's
And
my rant for that
yeah,
one.
no, that
My
was
guy is
great,
still
man.
not back. My guy is still not back. Where is he at, man? What is going on? They don't want to have this level of greatness on the show. That's what's happening. They're trying to stop our
You don't see
greatness.
me?
They're trying to block our greatness. They're trying to block the truth. They can't handle the truth, but it
They
is what it
can't
is.
handle the truth.
That's also true, like I said, for any S&P 500 company. Strategy went from barely in the Russell 2000 to now being like the number 86th ranked company by market cap. And that happened in 4 years. You know what I mean? So there is a strategy at play here, pun intended. Metaplanet, same thing. Basically, number one stock in Japan. Similar Scientific, zombie medical company that's coming back from the grave. A lot of companies are going to start adopting this strategy because it just makes sense. Why would you continue to hold dollars when you're losing money? And why would you not hold Bitcoin when you could just gain value? You know what I mean? Doing anything other than that, it's just not rational. If you're rational and you care about your company and you want to see it be around for the next 10, 20 years, then yeah, you're going to want to get on a Bitcoin standard. You really don't have a
Excellent.
choice in the matter. And that's the thing about Bitcoin. It's going to be adopted like gunpowder, right? In the words of Saifedean Ammous, the author of the Bitcoin standard. You can either just go ahead, buy it now while you have the chance, while it's cheap. 100,000 is very cheap, by the way. You can buy it while it's cheap and then be happy in the future, or you can continue to act like this is something that's just going to go away for some reason, and then you can just be sad about it, So really, it is what it is.
Can you hear
It's
me?
up to you to go ahead and make that decision for yourself. And then from there, we'll see what's up. Time will tell. 16 years of data so far, looking pretty good for all the people who are saying, "Oh, Bitcoin has no history. It hasn't been tested." It's been through 16 years of testing. Okay, and so far it's been all up and to the right. And if you understand the way that Bitcoin works, then you understand Bitcoin is not going anywhere. All right, there's not just going to be some random glitch one day that just crashes Bitcoin all the way to zero. And even if something like that did exist, there are over $2 trillion worth of value in the Bitcoin network. Those people have a vetted interest in making sure that it continues to work. You know what I mean? Like, they're not just going to let their investment go all the way to zero. People are going to work day and night the same way they already do to make sure that the network keeps on pumping out transactions and validating blocks every 10 minutes, the same way it's done for the last 16 years. in the same way that it will for the next 16. Right. So my guy is trying to rejoin. He is trying to reconnect. Please let my man back into the Riverside chat, man. This is ridiculous. Please let him come back. Oh my gosh, bruh. Oh my gosh, bruh. No, he couldn't join. Oh my gosh. I'm sick. I'm sick to my stomach. Well, what do y'all want to talk about? He'll probably just edit this out. So no point in me yapping. What's the price of Bitcoin? Basically 109,000. Not too bad. Not too bad. Not too bad. Wake me up at 150K. Yes.
You are really good, brother. You are dynamo. Because as you were talking and I saw you trying to buy time and I can hear you, but you couldn't hear me.
You can hear me?
Yeah. And it was like you was dancing right there. It was beautiful to see you dance. Yeah, for sure. And when you say that when you say McDonald's is going to go out of business, that's why we're here discussing these things, talking about these things. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Once you see it, and it touches everything. We're not just talking about banks and financial institutions. We're talking about everything, all the way down from the country, state, to the nation state, to the governments, to the city governments, to your personal household income, to your family offices, down to the individual. And that includes the companies, right? If you don't adopt this, it's basically adopt Bitcoin or die. And that's such a wild thing to say, right? But you broke that down.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. And to put it another way, if you didn't adopt the internet as a company, you went to zero. Facts. You know what I mean? Like if you don't have a website, if you don't have an app, if you don't have any way that people can connect to you on social media or whatever, if you have no connection to the internet and you're a business, you are not going to make it. You're going to go to zero, or you're just going to stay a very, very small local mom and pop, not even serious business. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Like
what? Imagine McDonald's with they would have.
Yeah, so that's major. You know what I mean? They do a lot of advertising online. You know, they allow you to order online. You know what I mean? Like these are all really important pieces of their infrastructure. And if you were to remove that, especially in the earlier days, then their ability to scale just would not have been there, right? And again, they would have been destroyed by someone who was on the internet. So if your business is not connected to the internet in some way, shape, or form so that you can connect with business partners in order to figure out leasing or franchising or the construction or the setup or the logistics or the ordering of the food or whatever it is, you're just not going to make it, you know, and end of the story. So it's a similar situation where if you're not on a Bitcoin standard, you're just not going to make it. And if that sounds too ridiculous to believe, at the end of the day, time will tell. That's the thing about Bitcoin. Sometimes you just have to wait for the truth to reveal itself. And us saying it in the present doesn't really mean much because who are we? We're just randoms. But eventually you'll look back and you'll say, oh, wow, that kid on the internet, I guess he might have been onto something. But by then, it's a little bit too late. You know what I mean? So it's up to you. You have to do your own research and come to the conclusion for yourself. But I am here telling you essentially the way I see things based on what I know. I would say the biggest thing is that the big guys with a infinite amount of money are here. Countries technically have an infinite amount of money. Technically, businesses, you know, they have a nearly infinite amount of money depending on the size and scale of the business. You know, businesses like Meta, you know, like Apple, right? These guys are coming, right? The banks like Cantor Fitzgerald, like asset managers like BlackRock, right? These guys are already here and they have so much money. The scale that they're able to buy at is ridiculous. And they're not really too focused on the price. They're indifferent to the price. So individuals care a lot about the price. They're like, it's 120,000. I can't really buy that. Again, you don't have to buy an entire Bitcoin all at once. Otherwise, I would own none. Right? I can't buy something that's $120,000 instantly. So anyway, individuals, you know, are very price sensitive. If they see the price up and it's 150,000, they might be a little antsy about getting in. Or if they see it down to 98,000, they might be very sad depending on when they bought in or whatever it is. Institutions, countries, they don't really care what the price is because the price doesn't matter. They don't look at the price tag when they go shopping. You know what I mean? Like they don't really need to see the receipt or the total. They just go ahead, swipe the card. It's gonna clear. You know, and that's basically how they're eyeing Bitcoin. So in the situation we find ourselves in, we now have these big players in the space that probably aren't going to sell for a very, very long time, and they don't really care about the price. So what does that mean for us, and what should we be doing? At least I am going to be continuing to dollar cost average, or DCA, into Bitcoin. I always buy a certain amount every single day, and I'm not going to stop. If anything, my buys are going to ramp up, because I know there's going to come a point that my little $100 that I might buy is going to buy me less Bitcoin because it costs more. Right? The price of all assets is going to continue to increase. All right. The government is in a little bit of a tight situation. The deficit's getting higher. Inflation's getting out of control. They have to pay back all this debt, and the only option that they really have is to print more money. Right? The government is kind of like someone who's bad with money, and they use credit cards to try to make up for it. Right? They got one credit card that's maxed out. The monthly payment is due, and they're charging interest on it. So what do? They get another credit card. They open a new line, and then they pay out that old one. So really, they're just kicking the can down the road. The government can afford to do that. Individuals really can't. Eventually, it catches up with you, and you end up either defaulting and losing your credit score, or you got to pay a bunch of money up front and try to come up with it, And the government's playing that same game. They're acting like they can't default, but instead of defaulting, what they do is they just debase the money and make everything more expensive for us, right? When they print money, they make everything more expensive for us. That includes food, that includes your clothing, but it also includes assets like a car, like a house, like gold, and like Bitcoin, like the stock market, right? So that's why stocks only go up. That's why housing prices typically only go up. That's why the price of stuff only goes up. It's because the thing that you're buying the stuff with is actually losing value. So back in the day, it would cost one piece of paper to buy a Bitcoin. That's $1 for a Bitcoin. Now it costs 100,000 pieces of paper to buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin hasn't really changed. It's the same thing, 16 years running. But really what's happened, the dollar just sucks. And because of that, you're not able to buy as much stuff with the same piece of paper. So I'm getting in a position where I want to make sure I have as much Bitcoin right now as I can, while my paper dollar buys more, because it's going to buy less in the future. So I want to make sure that I'm positioning myself for where the puck is going, right? In hockey terms, where's the puck going? All right. The puck is going towards
Gretzky.
Bitcoin. I want to be in the puck. I want to be where the puck is going, not where it's at. So I'm trying to get ahead of the curve by having as much of my net worth in Bitcoin as possible. Yeah. I don't remember exactly what he was talking about, but I'm sure it was something to do with United States and Bitcoin policy. So, Matthew Pines, and there's another guy named Bo Hines. He's goated. Dylan Sinclair, or Dylan LeClaire. He's amazing.
LeClaire.
And there's just so many different names to name in the space, CJ over there at, the Wealth Squad, Chris, he's amazing. CJK over there at People's Reserve, he's amazing. Obviously, Michael Saylor, Jack Mallers, you could go on and on. But there's a lot of great influential and, I guess, finance-based names in the Bitcoin space who are all innovating in their own kind of unique way. Everyone's playing a role. We're playing a role right now. Our role might be a little bit smaller, but we're working to boost our influence over time, because there are policymakers, but there's also opinion leaders. There are thought leaders.
The devil's trying to hold
there are
us
people
back.
who are disseminating the message out to different corners of the world.
Is trying to hold us
really
back.
That's what part of what we're here to do. There's people who are the coders and all that different stuff. So we're just trying to make it happen in our own way. So I'm not sure if I maybe have like a favorite person in the space. If anything, maybe I would say like Jack Mallers, the CEO of Strike. Jack Mallers is a beast. He's an absolute GOAT, underrated, highly underrated, young guy, so shout out to Jack Mallers. But besides that, just everyone has their ability to lend some sort of important credence to the Bitcoin network and kind of add their own spin on things, Jack Mallers is actually the GOAT, low key. I put him above Michael Saylor. Here's why. All right. If you watch a lot of Jack Mallers talks, they're just so raw, right? Some of them are very emotional, and they just capture like a different essence than Saylor. Saylor is very much engineer focused. He likes to talk about economic energy. He likes to talk about a lot of historical references, and those are great. Again, I'm not knocking Saylor. Saylor is a GOAT, but if we want to just talk about who has the best Bitcoin speeches, who is the most prolific tweeter, right? Who is the most prolific X poster? I would just give it to Jack Mallers. Jack Mallers is absolute young goat. He shows up to all these conferences and all these big dog meetings in his hoodie, instead of being in a suit and tie like everyone else, like the previous system, like the old system. Jack Mallers kind of flips the entire dynamic on its head and almost rubs it in the faces of all these old heads, right? He shows up in a hoodie and sweatpants, and people are like, is this kid serious? He can't be a serious person. But it turns out that he has more money than most of the people in the room. And two, he's focused on being a technologist and being a future forward thinking person who understands where the world's going rather than being so caught up in the little, the tricks of the old world, right? Oh, well, you have to wear a suit. Otherwise, no one's going to take you seriously. And if you don't wear a suit, then you're not going to be able to push your product or whatever. At the end of the day, whether you got a shirt on or a suit on or not, if you have the best product in the world, people are going to buy it. And if they choose not to buy it because, oh, he's wearing a t-shirt, okay, you're just an idiot. Like, you're actually just an idiot. You know what I mean? They talk about, oh, don't judge a book by its cover, but that's what they love to do all day. And I get it. That's fine. But you also have to understand, what am I actually bringing to you? What am I actually giving you? Hey, I just invented the iPhone. I'm on stage in a t-shirt talking about it, though. Oh, I'm not going to get an iPhone. This guy's wearing a t-shirt. Okay, you're an idiot. Keep using a BlackBerry or a Motorola. You're an idiot. You know what I mean? Like, just, it is what it is, so that's what Jack Mallers kind of represents. That's why I like Jack Mallers so much. That's why he's a GOAT, in my opinion.
I love Jack. Here's another question. We're going to wrap up soon. Thank you for coming out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'd like to hear your take. So you're solid on BTC. I heard you touch upon Sailor and MSTR. Give me your take on MSTR and all of these Bitcoin leveraged companies that are popping up. We have Century 21, we have, 21 Capital, we have Nakamoto, we have Similar, we have Metaplanet. They all have communities on X. They're going wild. Do you own any of these products, and tell us the difference between owning a product like that, like MSTR, and owning Bitcoin?
Yeah. For the most part, I just mostly hold strategy, right? I have a few shares of some of these other smaller ones. See some of these newer ones that have popped up, like Nakamoto. I just got into them very early, and I do believe that they have the potential to scale much higher in the future, right? But that's like long dated, and it's still waiting to be seen. They haven't done anything yet. So I do believe that they will be competitors to strategy, but I don't think they'll ever catch strategy. He just has too big of a first mover advantage. And the amount of money this guy is able to amass very quickly is just, it's too big for them to ever touch, in my opinion. But I do think it's cool. I think it's something that's going to kind of be like drawn out in a way. People are probably going to be fatigued by all the different Bitcoin reserve companies that are popping up. But it's just because, again, these guys don't really have a choice. It's like, oh, I'm getting fatigued about all these different social media companies or all these companies that are making social media accounts. I mean, they're just going to have to do that. You know what I mean? There's going to be a Wendy's Twitter account, a McDonald's Twitter account, and every other Twitter account you can think of. It's the same with any company being on a Bitcoin standard. They just want to keep their money. So every company wants to keep their money, so they're all going to be on some form of Bitcoin standard. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have to take out debt to put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Like Steak and Shake, all they did was accept Bitcoin. Now they're getting Bitcoin every day. Now, they didn't really have to change anything about their business. There's going to be a lot more of those popping up because Bitcoin is becoming a part of the daily zeitgeist for all corporates, for all financial institutions, for all people who are serious about storing value in the long term. And what's the risk, right? What are the actual risks involved? Because the reason why Strategy and Metaplanet and all these other companies go up faster than Bitcoin is because they're adding something else on top of Bitcoin. So in Sailor's case, he has a software business, and he's also able to take on debt and buy Bitcoin and leverage the company by doing that, right? Because the interest rate on the debt is 0% and Bitcoin's going up like 60% per year. So he's able to pay off the loans very easily because Bitcoin's appreciating more than what he's borrowing against it for. You know what I mean? So he's creating an arbitrage there. There are other companies like, let's just call it Nintendo. Let's say Nintendo goes on a Bitcoin standard. Nintendo already has an operating business that's very profitable. They have amusement parks, they have merchandise, they have games, they have online services. Stack that on top of Bitcoin, Bitcoin becomes your baseline. So if all your money's in Bitcoin to begin with, you're guaranteeing yourself that 60, 50% return every year. And then there's your operating business. How much revenue is that generating for you? What percent are you seeing back on that investment? What's your ROI on the business? So you're basically combining Bitcoin with your business. So if Bitcoin gives you 60% and your business is returning 20%, you're combining that to get an 80%. That's why these businesses are able to outperform Bitcoin. That's really what we're seeing in terms of the performance aspect. But what's the risk? The risk is the business going to continue to be successful? Right? Is the board going to make stupid decisions that are going to hurt the business? Is the CEO going to crash out? Right? Are they going to be involved in some sort of scandal that makes people want to turn against them and make their consumers not want to consume their product? Right? Are they going to lie about the Bitcoin that they actually hold? Are they going to get caught in that lie and realize that they were actually rehypothecating or lending out the Bitcoin, or they were selling the Bitcoin the whole time? Right? Will the SEC or some other governmental organization get involved with their company and then sue them for securities fraud? Like, anything can really go wrong with a company. And that's the layers of risk that you add on when you trust a company, right? That's the reason why trusting straight Bitcoin is minimizing the layers of trust involved. All right. So when you bet on a company like Strategy, you're taking on more layers of risk. That comes with greater returns, but you just got to know exactly what you're getting into. And if you want to know all the risk, you can literally read their 10K. A 10K is a filing for a public company that they have to do every quarter. It goes over all the risk that the company sees, and lawyers literally spend hours writing those up. So if you want to read all the risk involved, read a 10K, and then you'll be able to see exactly where things could go wrong for all these companies, right? But that's why I would say if you're going to do a portfolio, some people say 60-40, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. If you do that, you just love losing money. Congratulations. Yeah. But if you love saving money, if you love growing your purchasing power, the new portfolio breakdown is probably going to be 60% Bitcoin, 40% equities that are Bitcoin adjacent, right? So 60% BTC, 40% or 10% strategy, 10% Metaplanet, 10% 21st Capital, and then maybe 10% Bitcoin bonds, right?
Right.
So again, I don't know what that portfolio breakdown will look like. Everyone's is a little bit different, but that's much more constructive and much more useful to most people compared to like a target date fund or like a 20-year treasury note, So just my 2 cents. Again, time will tell, but so far the track record's looking pretty good for Bitcoin. I wouldn't bet against the trend.
Yeah, I wouldn't bet against it. I believe MSTR will be the biggest company in the world, but there is risk, and these guys are using debt to leverage up and add BTC value to the shareholders. So, even Michael Saylor says if this is too much risk for you, if it's too volatile, own Bitcoin. Just own Bitcoin. And most of his productions or presentations are based on owning Bitcoin. And none of this that he does right now would be possible if there was not Bitcoin. So it's all about Bitcoin. I don't want the audience to lose focus on that. Get Bitcoin, get your Bitcoin back first. If you don't own Bitcoin first, if you don't understand Bitcoin first, you're not going to be able to hold it properly. So you have to tap in and tune in with people like Gen Z right here so that you can have the knowledge to weather through these ups and downs, through the storms, because you'll have what we call paper or lettuce hands when the price drops and you don't know exactly what you own. So make sure you tune in and tap in with this young man right here. He's killing it. And I want to thank you so much. I think that's a good place to put a pin in it. Let everybody know where they can find you on the web.
Yeah, for sure. Find me on X at genZ BTC. Same on YouTube at genZ BTC. I have a Noster as well. Noster's kind of like Twitter, but there's like no CEO, like no one can censor you. Same thing at genZ BTC. So I just want to keep on taking over the space and educating young people, old people, everybody in between. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Main thing to understand is that you are not too late to Bitcoin. As long as you can buy it, it's very cheap. There's going to come a point where you can only work for it. And at that point, you are too late. So don't let that be you. Get off of zero. Don't have zero Bitcoin. It's very risky. And just continue to stack sats, which are the tiny pieces of a Bitcoin. Kind of like how a dollar is made out of cents. Like I need 25 cents. If I have 25 sats, that means that I have a little piece of a Bitcoin. So stack sats or die trying. You know what I'm saying? So that's the name of the game. Best of luck to you all, and keep on learning. Don't just buy Bitcoin, learn about it. And once you learn about it, you're going to want to buy it.
100%. 100%. There you have it. I'm Khalif Harold for the Real Hard Money Podcast. That's Gen Z. We'll see you on the next video. Stack sats or dot trying. You heard him. Take care.
See ya.